Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to give it another couple of minutes. We have some folks still joining, but while you are joining, if you can answer this question in the chat, it would be wonderful. We'd love to know who's in the room tonight, and I know that we'll have some folks joining us even as we get started. But if you could please type in the chat where you're joining from today and how many people are watching with you, that'll give us a sense of who's here with us tonight. Great, Des Moines, wonderful. Chicago, welcome. Welcome, Brian from Chicago. Alex, great. DC, thanks for being with us, Lindsay. Lakeview, welcome. Hyde Park, wonderful. Aurora, this is great. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Decorah, Atlanta, Aurora, Park Ridge, Darien, wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's a great night for a movie. The weather here in Chicago is terrible. So you picked the right thing to be doing tonight. We're also going to have a wonderful conversation. All right. So in the interest of time, we have a great agenda tonight, and I will go ahead and get us started in earnest. So good evening. I am Anna Garcia Doyle. I'm the Executive Director of the One Earth Film Festival. I want to welcome you to our virtual screening and discussion of Eating Up Easter, which is co-hosted by Plant Chicago, and which will be preceded by a short 5-minute film called Tossed by Patrick Thomas Keene of the One Earth's Young Filmmakers Contest. Like so many other events, this one's original context was upended by the pandemic. Its date, planned for March, and its location, Plant Chicago's awesome new space. We're glad to be able to finally proceed virtually with you this evening, and I would like to acknowledge and thank Jonathan Pereira, the Executive Director of Plant Chicago, and his team for their continued partnership over the years and for helping make tonight's event possible. I'd now like to bring in Jonathan to give his own brief welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan. I am the Executive Director of Plant Chicago, and as Anna said, we're definitely disappointed that we weren't able to do this in person, but feel very fortunate that this movie is still getting aired this evening. We're also looking forward to hosting this in person, perhaps in an outdoor setting next year at our new location in Backyards, an old firehouse. If you're not familiar with our organization, our mission is to cultivate local circular economies. And one of the reasons this film struck such a chord with our organization is it uses the literal manifestation of plastic and goes a lot deeper to talk about a lot of structural and systemic issues that we're facing. So I don't want to give away the movie anymore. Thank you for joining us tonight, and looking forward to the conversation with Andrea, Tyrone, and Liz and Doug after the film. Hope you can join us.
Great, thank you so much, Jonathan. So you'll be hearing more from Jonathan again later when he joins the panel, as he mentioned, for discussion after the film. And we anticipate that this evening is going to present some real rich opportunities for learning and provide a brave and safe space for critical conversation around issues that matter deeply at this time in our nation and in our world. So this year's Festival 2020 theme was and is the power of we, reminding us in this pandemic and election year that we can make change for our planet, both individually and collectively. Our mission is to utilize the power of film to spark awareness and action on issues of environment and topics intersected with environment, including social justice. One way that mission is perhaps reflected is in this quote. I always wondered why somebody didn't do something about that, and then I realized I am somebody. So that's our invitation to you tonight, among other things, to realize that you are somebody and that you can do something. A look at how our evening is going to unfold. So we're giving a brief welcome now, and soon we're going to introduce you to some folks who will help us have a great discussion after the film. Right before we review the film, our AV lead, Garen, will share some quick Zoom basics, but for now, please know that we will all be muted unless we're called upon to speak, and that we'll be using the chat for questions and discussion. The next portion of the evening will be viewing, where we'll watch the film together via Zoom's screen share feature. Then we're going to have conversation and Q&A, a facilitated discussion with our wonderful panelists about the film and its themes, including social and environmental justice. And we'll end by sharing some concrete actions you can take to help in the topic areas of tonight's film and discussion. One last thing before we meet our facilitator and program participants. If you are active on social media, please tell people this is happening. I'm a big fan of making sure that we amplify what's happening here now between among all of us so that it can spread to those not even in our virtual room this evening. So I would now like to introduce Doug Dixon, our discussion facilitator for the evening. Doug is a principal at Sales Performance Solutions and a neighbor in our community. By day, he facilitates commercial workshops around the world. By day and night, Doug commits to making the world more whole. Doug has been active in the local Chicago area environmental community and the One Earth Film Festival for a number of years. Doug, thank you so much for playing the role of facilitator this evening. I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Anna. Good evening, everyone. My name is Doug Dixon, and I'll be your facilitator, tour guide, for lack of a better term, for the next couple of hours as we move through rich, stimulating visual experience and a participatory conversational experience with our panelists this evening. This film and this discussion will likely raise some issues that could challenge your existing thinking about cultural and environmental justice. Personally, that's why I'm here. I'd like to be pushed to identify new ways that I can live my life more just, equitably, and sustainably. If that doesn't feel welcoming to you, then this might not be the right place for you. So in the spirit of being in community together to pursue a more equitable, just, and sustainable world, I'd like for us to review some agreements that I'd like for us to hold for the next couple of hours as we work together. I won't read them all to you one at a time, but I'll let you take a look at them. The first would be, let's approach this conversation, and not just the conversation, but all those participants, with respect. I will combine 4 and 2 to say that just because you think it's the way it is in your mind, that could just be your perspective. Open your mind to think about something different. We'd like for you to take with you what you've learned, maybe not the words, but certainly the experience. The concept of using I statements can be thorny, but I'll give you an example. Have you ever experienced an opportunity where you weren't comfortable and you thought you needed to say something different? That's a very passive voice. Using I statements. When I feel I own my response, I'm responsible for my responses, responsible for my life, people can engage with me and hear me better, as opposed to an indirect reference. Engage your active listening. The ratio of ears to mouth is always good. And I will hype on the one mic, one person speaking at a time. If you haven't noticed, we'll all be muted unless you are called upon to speak. Thank you. Next slide, please. So once again, back up. There you go. Once again, Doug Dixon, welcome to the One Earth Film Festival screening of Eating Up Easter. I think Anna had asked you to check in the chat box where you're from and how many people are watching with you. You may also want to input into the chat box why you are here tonight. What is the purpose of your visit? I will check in with, I am here, as I said, to be pushed and challenged to find new ways to live more sustainably, and hope you're here for the same reason. But I would like to take a brief minute to explain the theory behind the One Earth Film Festival. Some people like to watch movies to be entertained. That's nice. I don't have anything against you. Some people like to watch movies to be informed and be entertained. I won't hold that against you either, infotainment. But the purpose of One Earth Film Festival is both to inform and engage us and move us to want to act to do things more sustainably and more environmentally whole. So I was trying to dream up a word, and Anna hasn't told me she doesn't like the word yet. So my new word for us is we're info-actainment. So it's watch a movie, feel and think something, engage with discussion, and then go do something in the world to make it very much better place. So with that said, I'd like to introduce you to some of our participants who will help hold our conversation and ideas after the movie this evening. Once again, Doug Dixon, consultant, do consulting around sales performance, no big deal. Would like to introduce our panelists from the Shedd Aquarium. That would be Andrea Densham. She is the Senior Director at Shedd Aquarium of Conservation Policy. Tyrone Dobson is the Senior Volunteer Engagement Manager at the Alliance for the Great Lakes. And I have another colleague from the Alliance for the Great Lakes, Liz Hartnett is here, who will help us talk about some ways we can engage with the themes of this movie. And last but not least, I'll reintroduce Jonathan Pereira, who is the Executive Director at Plant Chicago. All of them will be joining us to answer our questions and participate in a lively discussion after we watch this incredible movie. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to the discussion. Without further ado, let's get to the movie. I know you all are anxious to see it, as am I. The Rapa Nui people are the theme of this movie, and the title of this movie is Eating Up Easter. The people of Rapa Nui are facing tensions between, let's say, growth and sustainability, or modernity and traditionalism, and they're seeking to balance that growth. The movie's 70 minutes. It was recorded in 2018. Can't wait to get to the other side of watching it for the discussion. I would like to now introduce our AV lead, Garen, and Garen will share some tips and techniques about how to negotiate and navigate with Zoom for the viewing and participation portion. He will also tee up the short movie that Anna referred to called Tossed, and a public service announcement. So I will quiet my voice, turn it over to Garen, and the next big thing you'll see will be the movies. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Doug. As Doug mentioned, just a quick tip right off the bat, everybody's audio is going to be muted unless otherwise prompted. It really just helps us keep everything nice and conversational, because we can, it's just a little tricky to have everyone's mics open at the same time. We do have everyone's video on for community building purposes. It's so nice to see everyone's faces and feel like we're in community, but we're going to ask that everybody turn the video off once we jump into these screenings in one quick second. Additionally, as mentioned, chat is going to be the main way we have that Q&A after the screenings tonight. Just use that chat function, and our facilitator will filter through those chats and relay them to whoever the question is being asked. And then if you're having any issues, feel free to message either myself or Sam. Sam, do you want to say hi really quickly?
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
And that is Sam. Feel free to message one of us. I know some folks who are having some issues with audio earlier. Hopefully those have been taken care of. And we'll hopefully get you taken care of as quickly as possible. Or if for whatever reason you're having audio issues, and hopefully you're not because you're hearing my voice right now, feel free to wave noticeably in front of your camera and we'll be scraping through those. If you're unable to hear at any point, feel free to message us, but also feel free to check your speaker settings, which are down in the bottom left-hand corner next to the mute button. And then one last little tip, if you start screening film and you realize that there's video overlaid on top of your screen and you would like to see the full screen of the picture, feel free to change your video layout by clicking that little minus button, and then you can switch back to whatever view works best for you once we jump into the post-film discussion.
Well, that was stimulating. I've watched the movie before, and I've seen something new this evening. But that's not the point. The point is, what have you seen? What is sticking with you? The question for the minute is, what are some of the scenes, people, or lines in the film that you remember? Please enter those thoughts into the chat box. Ooh, love it, love it, love it. Globalism arrived quickly, the giant snowball that starts eating things up. Clean out your own stinky bins. I love it. Yeah, that one stuck with me too. Any other ideas? People, concepts, words? That's okay. Suggest that we might want to move to talking with our action partners and fellow panelists. We're all in balance. Yeah, Mama Piru was a touching character. So what I'd like to do at this point would be to bring back our our panelists. I'd like to introduce them to you once again and give you more information about their biographies. The first panelist I'd like to introduce would be Andrea Densham. Andrea would love for you to stay in touch with her. So her email address is listed in the presentation, and everybody that signed up for this will get a copy of this presentation, so you can reach out to her later. Andrea works at the Shedd Aquarium as a Senior Director of Conservation Policy. She joined the Shedd in probably 2017 to help lead and create their conservation policy and advocacy team. It's pathetic that I didn't appreciate that much about Shedd. I just thought it was a beautiful building that housed aquatic life, but they spend tens of millions of dollars a year in education, conservation, and policy work. Welcome, Andrea.
Hello.
Hey, hey.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for the lighting adventure. Thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to engage in this wonderful dialogue about this important film.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we're glad to have you. We also have with us tonight is the Senior Volunteer Engagement Manager for the Alliance at the Great Lakes, Mr. Tyrone Dobson. This is embarrassing. I love the Chicago lakefront. I ride it probably hundreds of miles per year, even though it's a 17-mile track. And I'm never impressed with the lake and the work that it takes to maintain the lake until I reflect on one fact, that the Great Lakes contain over 20% of the world's freshwater, and Tyrone and Liz are engaged in helping us all protect that very valuable resource. Welcome, Tyrone.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to, similar to Andrea, happy to be here and engage in this dialogue with you all. And you know, Doug, I must admit, I too sometimes forget how great the Great Lakes truly are. Sometimes we do take them for granted. So the work definitely serves as a reminder of how important they are.
Thank you, Tyrone. And last but by no means least, our co-host, I guess, co-sponsor for the evening. I get to advertise him a little bit. This is a tongue-in-cheek advertising. He once had an operation at the plant, Jonathan did. And I visited there, and it was a fabulous facility that had public space, retail space, conference space, a living laboratory for a closed loop system, hydroponics in the basement. It was incredible. And then he moved. But I haven't seen the new place yet because of Corona, but I hope to fix that as soon as we clear this virus quarantine period. Welcome, Jonathan. Glad to have you from Plant Chicago.
Thanks, Doug. You can still come by on Saturdays. We have a market where every Saturday it's outdoor in Davis Square Park. You can pop in and look at the firehouse where we are right now.
Look what it
Marshfield.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate the
Let me know.
I will take you up on that because I need to do more. As I told everybody on the call, the purpose of my coming to these events is to figure out how I can advance sustainability in my life. So I don't shop exclusively at farmers markets. I think I need to, but I will jump into the questions. There are several popping up on the chat. I will throw each one of you the same question, and I'll start with Andrea. Andrea, Rapa Nui is both beautiful and remote. I found it beautiful and somewhat remote. Viewers might find it hard to connect the issue raised in eating up Easter to our lives in this city, in this country, and in this hemisphere. What issue from the movie most resonated with you as particularly relevant, either for its impact on us or our impact on the issue?
You know, I think this isn't a very we were going to show this film earlier, right as COVID-19 became impacting all of us in March, I believe. And what's happened since then, I think, has really illuminated for me the importance of us recognizing where things come from, who produces them, and what happens at the end. And that really doesn't matter where one lives in order to understand that cycle. And we have seen as COVID-19 has impacted our local communities, there are multiple ways to react, right? You can receive your goods. I and many folks I know started growing some of their own goods. They started composting more, or building compost, or figuring out ways they can work with others to jointly do that, right? So you bring food into your home, you find a way for it to be used again, to go back into the ground to grow more food, right? There can be a cycle, even if you live in an apartment, to do something like that. We can also think about how we live closely with neighbors, and how making choices about where you buy things and how you buy things actually has an impact on the communities. Knowing who your neighbors are, finding out what sort of small businesses are growing, building, producing things that can stay within the community and have a smaller impact is also incredibly important. However, so that's an issue of making choices about what we purchase, right? So I can go to a local bakery, I know who the folks that own it, I know where they get their grains from, and I can stay within my local community in order to support that. Or I can call Amazon and have them show up at my house, right? Like, so that's a choice. I can make a choice around that, and there's implications to those choices, right? And having some wisdom and some thoughtfulness about that can also build community as we do that, right? Because as I go to the store and as they're finding new ways to work through COVID to get me the food, as I purchase it for them, they're being creative, but I'm also building community. And I think this film really highlighted that tension between modernity and this notion of progress that's about getting something from afar to bring it close, versus choices we can make to try to build communities close by. You know, we work on trying to reduce plastic pollution at Shedd. It's not just about the pollution that we see at cleanups that we do in partnership with the Alliance for the Great Lakes. It's also about how that plastic's produced, who lives by it, what the impacts are for the folks who need to work with it or near it. So I think this film really, helped me, and I'm hoping it helped the viewers think more about what that form of production looks like, who's impacted by it, and who's impacted by the waste at the end. And hopefully later in the discussion, we can talk about producer responsibility, because you know, those things that are produced don't come out of nowhere, and the folks who produce them have a responsibility, I believe, on the end of a life, not just at the beginning of a life, for what that whole cycle looks like. And I think there might be some great ideas and some good discussion about that.
Well, great. I agree with you. Thank you. Tyrone, same question. Several issues were raised in the movie. Which one was particularly resonant with you that's of relevance to us?
So the one thing that stuck with me from this movie is how beautiful Rapa Nui is as a space. And I think it's oftentimes difficult for people to connect things that they see in movies like this to something more local at home. And the reality is, in the Great Lakes area, there's a wide range of types of venues, right? So here in Chicago, we are very much so familiar with this like juxtaposition of urban and the lake. But in other areas of the Great Lakes, it's very remote as well, right? Like everywhere in the Great Lakes is not like Chicago. And I have the privilege of knowing that because of my work as a volunteer manager. I manage cleanups that happen in all 8 Great Lakes states and on all 5 Great Lakes. And so what it reconfirmed for me is that, this same idea, the things that happen in Rapa Nui are very similar in many ways of what happens here, right? Where you have these really beautiful areas, and if you just take a few moments to review that and look a little bit closer, you'll see that there's still trash that's there as well, oftentimes left behind by tourists that came to visit these beautiful areas in the Great Lakes. I think in particular about Sleeping Bear Dunes in Traverse City, or places in the UP of Michigan, or in remote areas of Minnesota or Wisconsin, areas like that, right? The exact same concept is happening. Beautiful areas, tourists come in and leave the things that they brought with them behind, right? And I see that through my work. And so it really was like, it's always interesting to see that connection between somewhere as far away as Rapa Nui, and then to see that the same thing happening here in the Great Lakes area.
Thanks, Tyrone. I see Jonathan rubbing his beard. Not saving the best for last, but both Andrea and Tyrone have kind of bumped into an issue that's central to Jonathan, and that's the idea of a closed loop system. How do we manage what we bring in so that there's less that flows out and it's all contained therein? Anyway, not stealing your thunder, Jonathan, what were some of the themes in the movie that really resonated with you that you'd like to share with us?
That's great, because that actually wasn't the main thing that resonated with me this time, watching it a second time. I was struck how many times people ask Mama Piru to speak Spanish so they can understand you. And just the theme running throughout this is sort of this tension of like what people are asked or forced to give up of their culture when in the name of progress or like partnership or cooperation. It was in there the first time I watched it, but it just became very salient to me. And how, especially Mama Piru was just, she's, everybody was very cognizant of the change, the sort of cultural shift that was happening there. We're adapting and fighting in their own ways. But Mama Piru was like adamant, like, no, I'm gonna speak Rapa Nui, and you need to adjust to me. And people kept saying, nope, you gotta speak Spanish for us if you wanna communicate with us. And I think it just, I don't know if that was even intentional in the movie, but it really rang for me. And especially when you look in a place like Chicago or whole parts of the US, I lived in New York for a long time, just the amount of culture and sort of different cultures coming in and sort of being forced oftentimes or just adapting to our culture of excessive consumption. I think many people were trained to think of that as progress, right? Living in more comfort. But there's so much that we give up in the process. So.
Right. It's a trade-off. It's a choice, as Andrea said, which leads me to a question from my chat. Tessa, I guess, wants to give you a shout out. I'm wondering what sort of actions Chicagoan environmentalists should be taking to recognize the colonial legacy and neglect of indigenous cultures. Does she work for you? Any idea?
Was that a question for me in specific?
I think, okay, you talked about the cultural issues. That seems like a tailor-made question for Jonathan.
Man, I walked into this. So what was the question?
Okay, let me paraphrase. I'm sorry, Tessa, you phrased it well. I'll paraphrase it poorly. What kind of actions can Chicagoans take to be sensitive to colonialism and the neglect of indigenous cultures, specifically how we modernize and displace people and cultures?
I mean,
come on,
go along, start reading, talking to people, listening, stop talking. I say that as I talk. Yeah, I also go back to this movie. I don't think I saw it the first time or was there as an undercurrent. But also, I guess goes much further than in indigenous cultures, but just right now we're highly cognizant of people holding views that are different than us and being completely unable to listen and hear and absorb what they're saying. Just, you know, I saw this in this movie just with the amount of plastic and the amount of just excess that's sort of coming to the island, just feeling overwhelmed and recognizing that there are so many people, especially in this country and our communities, that are just overwhelmed with not being able to make enough money, just not being heard or being asked to conform. And that's, I go back to this, like, speak Spanish. Like you want to communicate, make sure, which is ironic because that's not the native language of revenue. So I don't think I answered that sufficiently, but I appreciate the question. Yeah.
I think you made such important points, Jonathan, about how extraordinary Chicago and Chicagoland is. We're a country, we're a city and a region with people from all over the globe, and intergenerational folks, right? Folks of many different generations from many different places. And one other thing that I've been really paying attention to in the COVID moment is the opportunity we have to have dialogue across time, across generations. And when we think about solutions, we think about it as this linear progress, right? Without the idea that going back to learn what may have happened before may provide us the exact answer to where we need to go, right? So I really encourage folks to listen, open, and foster intergenerational conversation, especially with folks that are not from your, ethno-geographic space. And also just a shout out to Chicago being one of the largest in the United States urban spaces for Native American communities and First Nations communities. We have a great urban community doing amazing work that we often don't raise up. But we also have multiple generations of Mexican Americans who have extraordinary histories. And obviously, if you really think about the first and second migrations from the South of African Americans, there's lessons learned in each one of those migrations. And that's just the beginning of that richness. But I think of the kind of solutions that I learned growing up in a town where I got to meet folks who kept bees and taught me how to keep soil healthy and vibrant. That is lessons that I've taught my daughter, who now is teaching other kids in college how to do that. If we keep that alive, there's an amazing richness that can come with it, I think.
Thank you. Let me echo what you said, Andrea. This is it's terribly important to me. It feels to me, or at least it felt to me as a younger man, that new and modern was intrinsically better and superior to what was old and tried. So I embraced everything. I needed 5 new color televisions. But to your point, I think, Jonathan, since there's points on the chat, paying attention to indigenous people, listening to other cultures, listening to the lessons that were learned in generations in the past, and not just accepting that this latest gizmo watch is the solution to all my problems, because I'm going to throw it away in 3 months. But anyway, thank you for your feedback. There are some other interesting ideas popping through in the chat. There's another new word, and I love new words. Where did it go? Oh, come on, ethnocide. I like that one. That's better than info-actainment. Let me see. We've committed ethnocide against our own indigenous. We got more questions coming through. Ooh, I'm going to bug Tyrone on this one. Oh gosh, he might not like this one. Too bad. This would get you for talking about obscure places in the Great Lakes. The film touched on how the plastic problem is simply a proxy for larger problems in our society today. What would you add to this idea? What do you think about that?
I think that, and I think that's spot on. When you think about the issue, here in this film of like this idea of like the pollution that's come around. Like you have to you oftentimes like the easy way out to say, oh yeah, plastic's a problem. But when you really think about it, it's like more than that. There's a lot of other issues that link up as the reason why like that plastic is the symptom here in this movie. So you have, likely some over tourism that's happening in this area to some extent, or at least some exploitation in terms of in like the space of tourism. But it also manifests in the way that and I think that Andrea and Jonathan definitely are more experts in this than I am, like this entire life cycle of goods, right? So like what happens to it once I finish the water bottle? Like whose responsibility is it to do something with that? And you saw in the film with with it was like what the several hundred tons of bales of trash, right? And even when they talk about, I remember she was like, we send over the bale of cardboard and we get like what, a quarter of a cent back or something like that. Like all of these issues, like that's what we see, because it's hard to not see a giant bale of plastic that's been bound together. You can't unsee that, but it's really symptomatic of the other issues, right? And so by just looking at trying to solve the plastic issue, it's looking at all the other ones, but then also recognizing how interconnected all of these issues actually are. Oftentimes we take an approach of saying, well, we got to solve one thing at a time. When in reality, if we solved multiple of these issues at once, or at least try to tackle those like kind of all at one time, we would ultimately have a faster impact to the end goal in and of itself. So that's something just to think about in relation to how the plastic pollution problem manifested in the film.
Thank you. Don't disagree at all. Do you, Jonathan or Andrea, have another embellishment on the concept of the plastic problem as being a metaphor for other issues that you could connect to Tyrone's point?
I think there was at least one character that was sort of explicit about it. All of that stuff comes, I mean, not all of it, but explicitly saying that all of this stuff comes with the tourism, and the plastic was, yes, exactly right, an allegory, or for the pressure of outside culture coming in and progress, right? The narrator's father, who was, making a supermarket that was filled with lots of convenient items, and you hear this refrain a lot, like, hey, this created 50 jobs, or this project created this amount of money, and what wasn't made explicit on his part was like all of that progress is going to lead to more trash, right? Even more, wasn't even like, most of that probably wasn't even recyclable trash, like the stuff that had no value, that was just going to the landfill. So the plastic that ends up there is it's the physical manifestation of all the ills that come with the so-called progress.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Oh gosh, you guys are going to wish I'd asked you the earlier question, because they get more difficult as we go along. So I guess I'll pick on Andrea with this one. It's a really tough one. How do we rebuild an economy around something, around other things? If we're not building it around consumption and leaky supply chains, what are we building around?
Yeah, I've been really inspired with regenerative agriculture, and how it can be kind of at the root of how we envision new economies. Because regenerative agriculture moves us away from pesticides and over nutrients towards composting and smart harvesting of products. So if we think about it in the context of the problem around plastic, well, I'd love it when we reuse things. So I'd rather use an aluminum thing or a metal cup or a ceramic cup than a plastic cup. But when we do need things for packaging, for example, as opposed to using plastic, we can advance and try to support farmers and small farmers who are using regenerative agricultural practices to grow switchgrass, to build more sustainably produced packaging that then could be composted again and go back. And through that whole chain can be people who learn those technologies when they're young, that help continue to advance it, that employ folks and do it in a way that doesn't pollute and doesn't cause harm. And that switchgrass is the kind of stuff that in my back, you can see behind me, are deep rooted grasses that we don't have often on our shorelands, which means that when the winds get high and the waters get high, it takes it all and makes it go away. So there's some ways, I just gave you a little bit of a cycle there. There are ways that we can think of economies in that way. We think of innovation, like I said earlier, as this linear progress away from the past, but regenerative agriculture actually is kind of indigenous and more native knowledges from long past, way past the 50s. But using some smarts that we have now and applying it to that and integrating that, we can, I think, come up with some more humane economies. And the last thing I just want to make a point about is sometimes we think about economy in a real macro way. I think if we bring it back down to the human scale, which I think Jonathan and the plant and actually Tyrone's work across the Great Lakes do, that can really change our scope and idea of what healthy economies look like.
Super. This is really bad. The questions get harder as the evening goes on. This one's specifically targeted, I like the way I'm saying this, to Jonathan. Wow, glad you didn't ask me this question. But I love this question because I would have asked it myself. Jonathan, can you share a bit more about how exactly circular economies work or are a solution? Also, how communities can be empowered or enabled to engage in this type of system. And I will add a paren, especially in an urban environment. So how does a circular system work when you're surrounded by concrete and creepy people?
Not everybody's creepy. That's we got 2 hours to deal with this, a couple weeks. Essentially, a circular economy is acknowledging that the big problem of our Earth is that our economy is based on sort of this concept of infinite extraction, that there are infinite resources, yet we live in a finite world. We know that there's finite resources, fossil fuels, just even extracting climate change out of there. Things like phosphate rock, phosphorus, supplements for fertilizers, sand, even helium, rare earth metals. All these things are finite, but we're using them as if we're putting helium into birthday balloons, right? Helium is like, you don't get helium back; it goes in the air. So it's prioritizing how we do that and figuring out systems that recapture it. So the more businesses that are focusing both on upstream and downstream, so sourcing less virgin materials and recapturing more materials, and making sure that downstream as well. Andrea mentioned this earlier, but really extended producer responsibility. Businesses taking responsibility for the materials they create. So all those plastic bottles were produced by businesses that have convinced us that's a product that we need, that we don't really need. We don't need to, in most cases, not all cases, obviously, there are times that people need water out of a plastic water bottle in emergencies and things like that, but most of us drink it out of convenience. Not because it's safer, not because it's it's convenience, and we're sold and we're drawn to the package. So then how can they benefit? It has to be businesses that are also not based on selling us more stuff that we don't need, or stuff that we don't necessarily need, and just convincing us how to buy more stuff. So that might be more services that we buy, more things like that. And at a local level, again, Andrea mentioned this before, but this is a really great time to be aware. Everyone's very focused on local right now. Get to know the small businesses that are working on this stuff. Be aware of who's composting. Ask them, why are they doing this process? Where are they sourcing the materials from? Be the friendly a knowing customer that asks these questions, make suggestions. Just because the company isn't doing something that you think is right now doesn't mean they aren't trying. So now's a really great time to have those conversations. That's the short version of it. No, I did not capture. I did not capture the whole sentiment of that question.
You gave me 2 hours. I'm going to come back and get my 2 hours, not for the other 100 and something people on the call. I hate to do this, guys, but Anna has me on a rather tight time frame, and there are lots of people on the call that are on very tight time frames. So I'm going to kind of paraphrase some of the final questions and hit each one of you once. What are the, I'll pick on Andrea with the policy question. Andrea, what do we need to know, listeners, in 90 seconds or less, about policy actions that we can take as individuals or as a collective to help with sustainability issues?
Absolutely. At the federal level, there's a great bill called Break Free from Plastic. And those folks who like the story of plastic, we actually showed it to members of Congress just before COVID hit. So call your members of Congress, and you can support that. Call your state legislators. There are 4 bills we had in this session. So let them know that you want to reduce plastic and break free from it, and let your local older folks in. So this is Chicago based, but those of you who are outside of Chicago, there are legislation in cities and towns all over our region. So call your elected official, tell them that you want now there to be movement on this, that you do want there to be extended producer responsibility, and that we do need to move away from those single-use products that are not part of the solution. The next thing I just want to say is, as we've been talking to restaurants recently, they want to hear from you to say that you want a reduction in plastic. They want to hear from you as consumers, because that helps them with decision making. And then the last piece I want to just highlight is just part of what Jonathan was saying, which is that there are a bunch of really cool, innovative things that have come out of COVID with our small businesses. So many little mom and pop restaurants that also are selling produce from the local urban farm. Figure that stuff out, go do it. Also, if you're not tracking Black People Eats, go follow that guy on Instagram. He's going to teach you of all these amazing places to eat in Chicagoland. And I think this is a moment for us to expand our worldview and expand our world, even though we're close to home. So thanks for giving me that opportunity.
Thank you, Andrea. Tyrone, it's your minute in the bubble. Policy or personal action. Tell me something. What do you got?
Will do. I'll leave the heavy stuff to Liz to talk about some of our other bigger policies. But the one I will do is a little bit of an audible. I had the opportunity to participate in a challenge through the Alliance for the Great Lakes, was to live a week without single-use plastics. And let me tell you how difficult that is. I knew it would be challenging before I even started, but when I did it, I realized the extreme difficulty it was to do that. It was truly impossible for me to do that. And beyond the glitz and glam of trying to do a challenge, what it did teach me is how pervasive the issue is. And what that does is stuck with me. It's something my mom used to say to me all the time as a kid, is the more you know, the more you can do. So the more I knew about the issue from a personal experience, a learned experience, it changed how I grocery shopped. It changed how I purchased things online. It changed the types of vendors that I would go to and the questions I would ask when I would go to restaurants and things like that. Right? So it changed fundamentally the way that I moved throughout the world. And I would encourage, the listeners on with our time today is to, visit our website, take that plastic-free pledge, but then also give yourself that challenge of trying to go a week without using single-use plastics, and then see what that experience is for you and how that then will change the life that you live moving forward. So that would be my takeaway for you to experience based on my experience in the challenge itself.
Powerful. Thanks for sharing. Jonathan, put you back in the barrel, buddy.
That's great. Tyrone, thank you for saying that. It is really hard. And Anna, I know you mentioned doing it for Lent. I've tried it the last few Lents, and it is very difficult, but very eye-opening. I also recommend looking downstream. So this is a great time now we're all home. Do a waste audit. Go through your trash and your recycling. Actually weigh everything. Figure out what you are actually buying. Look through your trash and your recycling and weigh it. How much are you composting, and then you can benchmark and actually set goals for yourself. And then I'm going to take Tyrone. You mentioned this on Friday, but go vote. So make sure you vote. And I think you all have some resources. Can you? I'm going to put you on the spot and make sure you have some resources to share. Is that right?
You are definitely right, and I know
Okay.
that Liz probably has that link a little bit more handy than I do. And Liz,
Right.
if you don't, I can find it really quickly.
Okay.
Jonathan just threw me a softball. He told me to get off it and move to the action slide. We'll briefly recap, folks, some of the stuff that I've heard the panelists talk about as actions. Start thinking about the chain of supply. You are a member, you're a member of the cog in this chain, that the less junk you bring into your place, the less junk you exit with the place. An excellent way to begin to reduce the amount of waste in your world is buy from people that don't use a lot of packaging. And Jonathan has got a Saturday event at Plant Chicago to help you do that. Tyrone mentioned how important it is to pay attention to the beauty, because it doesn't last long. And we all, if we're not conscious of how we behave, we add to the ugly in the world. And I will reinforce Tyrone's point. Try one more thing. We're all at the stage of sustainability maturity that the next thing is hard, but it makes it so much more worthwhile. So the other ideas that many other panelists have shared with us in the past is prevent plastic pollution by refuse and reduce. I think Jonathan said quite clearly that he likes to advocate for noisy customers to tell their vendors what they don't want in terms of packaging supplies. So avoid single use and make the pledge. Survey Monkey's out there. Liz is going to chime on in a second. If I ever shut up, vote, vote, vote. Am I being repetitive? Vote. Policy as an individual, I'm not that juicy, but I do have a vote. I can use it judiciously and make all sorts of changes. I encourage you all to understand the positions of all the people on the ballot and vote for those people that advance your positions and your causes, and not the folks that continue to develop waste streams. And my favorite one, item number 3, volunteer. We all have extra time, I think, and there are lots of ways to get involved. Liz is a member of YPC, and I think I will shut up and let her talk about some of the actions that might be available to us in the Chicago area to support sustainability, especially around the lakes. Are you out there, Liz?
Thank you, Doug. So I am a volunteer with the Alliance for the Great Lakes on their Young Professional Council. So that's just one way, or one of the many ways that people in Chicago can get involved to help protect the Great Lakes. Like Tyrone mentioned, the Alliance for the Great Lakes has the plastic-free pledge, but other things the Alliance does are, like I said, the YPC. So we're a group of young professionals who are really passionate about protecting and preserving the Great Lakes, and also being advocates for the Great Lakes, whether that's tabling at events or hosting fundraisers, or just kind of talking to people about the Great Lakes and why they're so precious to preserve and why it's so important that we take care of them. But as the other slide shows, the Alliance has Adopt a Beach, which I know right now we're getting into cold weather in Chicago. We've got some thunderstorms going on. It's not great to be outside. But by the Adopt a Beach program is really just kind of what it is. You go, you do a beach cleanup, and you adopt the beach. You make it yours, and it's a great experience. We've done it with the YPC because you really do get to see how much plastic is on a piece of pristine lakefront, but also you see what other kind of waste happens there too. And then the third one was the Ambassador Program. I think we have 4. The plastic-free pledge, I think, we can consider that too. The Ambassador Program, I'm not super familiar with that. I'm not going to lie about that, but I do know that is similar to the YPC in the sense that we advocate for the Great Lakes. You're talking about the Great Lakes. You're getting out into communities and really sharing the who, what, why about the Great Lakes, and any specific policy that does help to protect the Great Lakes too. So yeah, and the other thing too that was on that last action slide and that is also on the Alliance's website is a voter toolkit, which the Alliance has put out years before, but it's a great tool to use not only to ask local candidates or any candidates about questions surrounding the Great Lakes and protecting the Great Lakes and what they are planning to do with their platforms or part of their campaigns if they are elected. But this year it also includes information about local candidates. So if you're still filling out a ballot, if you're still thinking about going to vote on November 3rd, or if you're voting early, it gives you information about your local candidates and it gives you links so you can do some research yourself to see who is supporting what. So yeah.
Excellent. Wow, that was incredible. I've never heard anybody get that much information in that tight a time slot in my entire life. You go, Liz.
Thank you.
So very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. This is the moment of truth for me. As I intimated early in our time together, the purpose of the One Earth Film Festival is to engender action in everybody that watches a film. Really, the film was the preliminary. The feature for tonight was the discussion with these incredible panelists, and hopefully that helped generate ideas for ways we can advance our work. So the question to everybody on the line tonight is, I am ready to harness the power of me or the power of we by. What idea have you seized on tonight that you can implement to increase or improve your sustainability work? Please don't leave me hanging. Somebody is willing to harness the power of me. The chat box is still, you guys are not cooperating. What am I going to do? I type slow. So telling everyone I know to go plastic free for a week, I'm not that grown yet. Thinking more holistically, got it. Mine back to everyone, this one's hard, but Jonathan got through to me. I'm gonna be one of those mouthy customers that pushes back on every plastic that's offered to me, because if we don't push back, they don't stop. It's in their interest. Any other ideas? Power of me, power of we. What can we do? Help our friends back in Michigan get out to vote. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. 2010, lost it. 10,000 votes. Could have made a difference. Let's get out there and do this. Thank you. Thank you. I will not drag this out beyond its useful conclusion, but I will graciously and repetitively thank all of you, all 100 or so participants out there in the world, from Washington to Atlanta to all parts of Chicago, for taking a couple of hours of your precious time to join us in community to learn more about vital issues affecting Mother Earth. I would like to thank all of my panelists, Liz, Jonathan, Tyrone, Andrea. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being who you are and being willing to share your gifts with the rest of us in pursuit of a better world. Every one of the agencies and organizations represented tonight is in this game for the long haul. The PowerPoint you'll receive, all of your participants after the call tonight, has links to every organization, including the Alliance for the Great Lakes, Plant Chicago, Shedd Aquarium, and the One Earth Film Festival. Please check them out, engage, enrage, and we'll make this world a better, better place. Last but not least, well, not quite last, almost last but not least, we've got another screening for another incredible film this Sunday. So check out the One Earth Film Festival website to more stimulating panelists, excellent facilitators, and incredible movies. And last but not least, Anna's not going to be happy. I may have finished this off 2 minutes early, but thank you all. I see many people on the screen. I see tons of folks on the participant list. I honor and bless you all using a strange Asian greeting. Namaste. Have a good evening. Peace and love. Thank you all. Have a good night.